All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hi. Welcome to the third event for the Library Talks. We are excited to be bringing some amazing authors to you this year through our virtual talks like this. I am Paul Sims. I'm the Assistant City Librarian here at Santa Clara City, where I'm broadcasting. I'll be your guide for tonight's talk. I will be talking with our amazing guest probably from his home, Andy Weir. Throughout tonight's program, we'll be taking questions in two ways. We'll be for the librarians that are watching from other libraries throughout the state. You can take questions from the audience and type them into the Q&A that's on the one side of your screen. On the right side of your screen there. Sorry about that. And they'll show up alongside for everyone else to see. If you've got a smartphone with Twitter, then you can tweet. You can tweet your questions to us right from your seat with the @reply of @thelibrarytalks, all one word, and use the hashtag #LibTalks, LIB Talks. So we can see your questions. My faithful assistant here will be moderating some of the questions and helping me kind of answer them. So if I look a little discombobulated as I answer the questions, I apologize for that. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest tonight, who really needs no introduction at this point. Andy Weir was first hired as a programmer for a national laboratory at the age of 15 and has been working as a software engineer ever since. He's also a lifelong space nerd and devoted hobbyist of subjects such as relativistic physics, orbital mechanics, and the history of manned spaceflight. The Martian was his first novel. I'm going to hand the mic over to Andy, and hopefully we are able to see and hear him. Andy, are you with us?
Yeah. Hi, how you doing? You got me?
I think we got you. We're on the screen right now, so there you are. Great. Hi, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So as I said earlier, you probably heard we are broadcasting to over 30 libraries across the state of California tonight. We have a good crowd tonight here at Santa Clara City, and I'm sure many of our other libraries have a equally good turnout. So
excellent.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. We'll start, and we'll just take the questions as they roll in, if you don't mind, and just feel free to jump in if it's something you don't want to talk about or something you do want to talk about. So
pretty much anything's fair game. Anything you want to ask me is fair game, except for I will weasel out of like politics questions.
Okay, that sounds fair. That's great. All right. So The Martian is probably the most math-filled novel I have ever read. Did you find that you had pushback from your editors or your publisher about including so much math and science?
No, everybody liked that a lot, actually. They wanted to preserve it. And in fact, in some cases, they asked me to clarify more, to get even more into it in some places where they're like, oh, I didn't quite follow this. Can you explain it a little deeper in this part? And so, yeah, no, they were very supportive of the technical accuracy.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Did you find people, like, I'd heard that you were kind of posting sections of the novel to a blog or just allowing friends to look at it?
No, I was posting it publicly on my website. Every chapter I posted as I wrote it. It took me about 3 years to get it all up there.
That's great. Did you find people like fact checking you? And
Oh yeah, there were. I had a regular reader list at the time of about 3,000 people. I'm basing that on the size of my mailing list. It took me 10 years to accumulate that, so it's not as impressive as it sounds. But yeah, they would make sure to tell me when I got anything wrong, because there's nothing nerds like me love more than finding scientific errors. So it was like having 3,000 fact checkers. It was great.
Wow, that's fantastic. Was there something in there that you felt like at any point did people overstep their fact checking or make you feel kind of like you'd made a mistake, a real grave error in your?
Well, I mean, there certainly people found like significant errors that I went back and fixed. Yeah, sure. I mean, overstepping boundaries. I don't know. It's not like how do I put it? Readers giving me feedback have no responsibility to obey boundaries. Feedback is valid no matter what they say, right? I can choose to ignore it. So, if people gave me feedback about like more creative stuff, I would pay attention, but stuff I would pay attention, but I wouldn't necessarily make changes based on it. But when somebody said, "Oh, you got these stoichiometry wrong on this chemistry," then I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I better fix that." It's objectively wrong.
That's good. That's a nice way to think of it. I think I know a lot of authors who probably might feel a little offended, but that's fantastic that you're.
You can't be offended by feedback. I mean, I've had some pretty weird feedback. Like I've had people like go on a prolonged tirade about because I swear a lot in the novel, and just like this angry. This very very long angry emails with no profanities in them about how bad it is to swear, and I'm like, well, okay. I mean, that's feedback, and it is valid. It's feedback I've chosen not to prioritize, but everybody's opinion is a valid opinion, and if you write a story and make it public, they have every right to let you know what they think.
That's great. Did you find that all the swearing and to me it really kept the novel really light and really friendly and kind of funny, actually.
It's like he's talking to you. It's like your buddy talking to you over a beer.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that really came through, and I think that's probably why the novel was such a success. But I think some people might have given you criticism that Watney probably would have been a lot more depressed or a lot more.
Yeah, that's the main like critique that is not like Lunatic Fringe stuff that I get, is they say like, well, Watney probably, I mean, realistically, any person in an environment like that, in a situation like that, would have deep, like, it would have a huge psychological impact on him. I mean, he's stranded alone and desperately trying to survive for over a year and a half. I mean, it's just it would be an incredible psychological strain. So I have two answers to that. The first one is the real answer, and the second one is the BS answer I give. Well, I'll do them in reverse order. The hand wavy, my explanation is that, okay, Mark Watney is an astronaut. He's not some guy off the street who survived a plane crash and now is trying to, he's an astronaut. They're a cut above. They're made of sterner stuff. He was chosen for a manned Mars mission, only the third manned Mars mission in history. So he has the right stuff, and he has a psychological profile that can handle tremendous amounts of stress for very long periods of time. And so that's his personality makeup is a rare gem among all of humanity. That's my official explanation. The real answer is I didn't want to write that kind of book. I wanted MacGyver in space. I didn't want a deep psychological study of a man's struggle against crippling loneliness and debilitating stress. I wanted MacGyver on Mars, and so
that came through. That was really great. So
cool.
Let's see. Did you? Let's see. Sorry.
No problem.
Did you expect? Sorry. Yeah. Did you expect the novel? I mean, it was pretty light for a lot of the parts. I know there's pretty intense, but it comes across as a thriller more than science fiction. Did you kind of intend it to be that way, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm writing, and I don't always succeed in this, but this is kind of my kind of mantra. It's like when I'm writing, if I'm writing a section, I ask myself, okay, imagine the reader is laying in bed, getting a little reading in before he or she goes to sleep, right? Just like, they do about 20, 30 minutes of reading just to unwind at the end of the day. And they're already in bed. They already got their covers up. They got their desk lamp on, and they're reading on their e-reader or the physical book, whatever. There is a point at which they say like, okay, I'm tired. I'm going to put the book down for the night and go to sleep. Okay. What is the point at which they do that? It's when things slow down enough that they're like, okay, it's like, no, I must know. Okay, he survived that. Okay, now he's talking about how much he misses his girlfriend back home or something. I can read that later. That's where he put the book down. So if I'm writing a section that I feel like this is the part where the reader would put the book down for the night, why does that section exist? Like, that's what I'm like, if this is when the reader would put the book down, then I shouldn't be writing this. I should never give the reader the opportunity to put the book down. I want you up until 3 a.m. and then regretting it the following day. That's so.
That's probably why it was made such a great film too. So I'm going to admit something. I did not see the film. I have not seen the movie yet. I will. I did read the book, and I thought it was fantastic.
Well, you're the reason Spectre beat us this week.
I know. I'm so sorry. I was at the library conference.
Your ticket would have made up that $70 million difference if only.
But did you find there was a lot of differences in the movie, in the process of translating this from your novel to the screenplay, or?
Well, it's a very, very faithful adaptation. I think if you liked the book, I bet you'll like the movie. It is one of the most faithful adaptations of a book to film that I've seen, and I'm really very happy with it. I mean, they had to cut some stuff out, otherwise it'd be like a 6-hour movie, right? So, I mean, some stuff had to go. But the stuff they cut I think they made good decisions. The screenplay writer is Drew Goddard. He did a fantastic job. And the minor differences between the book and the film are all to make the visual medium more exciting. And I think it's fantastic.
Oh, that's great. That's good. How long did it take you to write the book? I think you'd mentioned you'd been working on it for a few years. Can you tell us about your process a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was just, so at the time I was working on, I had my website where I just dumped creative writing, and I was working on 3 different serials at the same time, and The Martian was one of them. And so, sometimes I'd write a chapter of The Martian, sometimes I'd write a chapter of like one of the other serials, sometimes I'd write a short story. It was a really free-form process. It took me about 3 years to write The Martian, start to finish. I started in 2009, I finished in 2012.
Wow, that's great. And then to get it, so you self-published it initially? I mean,
yeah. So I was technically it's self-publishing when you post it to your website, right? Although I wasn't charging. When I finished it in 2012, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to move on to other serials or whatever. And then I started to get email from people saying like, hey, I love your story, but I hate reading it on a website, and which is fair. My website sucks. And well, it is. It's just this. It's this total lazy. It's like white background, blue links, left justified. Yeah, but they'd say like, I love your story, but I hate reading in a website. Can you make an e-reader version? So I did that, and I posted the e-reader version to my website. And I'm like, okay, there you go. There's an e-reader version. Then I got email from other people saying, hey, I'm glad there's an e-reader version, but I'm not very technically savvy, and I don't know how to download a thing from the internet and put it on my e-reader. Can you just post it to Amazon? And Amazon has a self-publishing system called KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. Any idiot can use it. And and so I posted it up there. And all you have to do, you post it and you set the price. The price has to be a minimum of 99 cents. They make their money off of ebook sales. They actually lose money on every Kindle they sell. So they lose money on the hardware because they know they're going to make money on the book sales. So you're not allowed to give books away for free. And so, yeah, I set the price to the minimum, 99 cents. And then Amazon holds on to it for about 2 days to have a human look at it to make sure it's not just a bunch of goat porn. Hey, don't judge. But and then it went live, and I said, all right, everybody, you can read it for free on my website, or you can download the e-reader version for free from my website, or you can pay Amazon $1 to put it on your Kindle for you. And that was kind of the point at which it became kind of professionally self-published.
Wow. And then you made the leap. Did somebody like the publisher kind of reach out to you and say, you probably a few?
Yeah. After 6 months or so of it selling, and it was selling really well, which is funny considering you could get it for free from my website, but a lot of people bought it. It's because $1 is it's such a small amount of money that people are like, okay, I can, in exchange for $1, I can push this button and have the thing on my Kindle. It's like people are willing to pay $1 to get around technical hassles, right? So anyway, it was selling really well. It made it to the top of the sci-fi bestsellers and onto the top like 100 all books and on Kindle, and it was selling really well. And an editor named Julian Pavia at Crown Publishing in New York, which is a division of Random House, took a look at the book and he's like, I don't know if I want to read it or not. I'm not sure. And he was talking to a colleague of his named David Fugate, who's a literary agent, and they deal with sci-fi books. That's their niche. And David's like, well, I'll read it, and I'll let you know what I think. So Julian's like, sure, go ahead. And David read it, and he liked it, and he came and became my agent. He said, like, hey, do you need an agent? because I bet you I can get you a book deal. And so I said, sure. And then David's like, great. And then he turned around and said, okay, Julian, how much are you going to give us for this book?
Wow.
So yeah, and so that's how everything was backwards for me than it is for most writers. It's like I wrote a book and I posted it for free. I never expected it to be anything other than a thing I posted to my website. Then I was like, you know, fans requested that I post it somewhere that they could buy it. And then like a literary agent came to me, and then publishers came to us, and then Fox came to us for the film rights.
Wow.
So
kind of like a fairy tale, actually.
yeah, really, no, it's like a Vanilla Sky kind of thing. You're like, okay, did I die actually a while ago? Am I in a coma, just having all my fantasies come true, thinking, you know, I don't know.
It's pretty awesome. That's great. So you actually you live in the Bay Area now. I'm not sure you always lived in the Bay Area. I heard someone from Davis say that's your hometown. I don't know if that's true.
That's a common misconception. So I was born in Davis. But I only lived there. My family only lived there until I was about 1 year old, and then we moved to Livermore. And so Livermore is really what I consider my hometown.
Awesome.
And I lived in Livermore most of my life. Well, most of my childhood, rather.
Well, and we have Livermore Public Library hosting this event there tonight.
Oh, okay. Well, hi, Livermore. I have actually been in person to events at the Livermore Library, so because yeah, I mean, I'm usually too lazy to go to in-person events, but I've got a soft spot for Livermore.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I bet. So growing up or living in the Bay Area, and actually like currently you live like right in Silicon Valley, did you have a lot of contact with NASA and some of the other folks that are in the scientific community that might have something to do with
Nope.
being an astronaut? No. Okay, that's an easy
I didn't know anyone in aerospace at all when I wrote the book. I was totally on my own. All of my research was just Google and a lot of math.
Wow, that's great. And did they?
Well, the cool thing about aerospace is they're so open about it. Like, there's like, I mean, people make websites about it. People go out of their way. I mean, all this stuff, almost all the stuff is public domain. Like NASA's stuff is almost entirely public domain. And so you can just go look it up. It's not like if I was writing a book about like military stuff, like if I was writing a Tom Clancy book, I might have a difficult time finding some of the details I wanted, right? I'm like, oh, exactly what is the power output of a Seawolf class nuclear reactor? That might be a secret that nobody talks about, and I'd have to make it up. But for space stuff, everybody loves to talk about it, and it's totally okay for everyone to share that. So it's very easy information to find.
That's great. That's great. Well, so I'm getting a lot of questions about kind of some of the scientific and NASA related event. So like one of the questions from Aaron is, in reality, would a NASA astronaut be cross-trained to handle all of the disciplines that the main character in the book and the movie encountered?
The short answer is yes. Astronauts are trained unbelievably well. I mean, they're trained for all sorts of eventualities. I've been to a bunch of events with Commander Chris Hadfield, who was the commander of ISS for a while. He's the guy who did the ground control to Major Tom song in space, and yeah, and he was telling me like he's been trained in so much stuff, it's ridiculous. Like, I mean, he was the commander and he's a pilot, and so those are some of the things. But they also taught him how to do like basic surgeries, and I mean, it's like they don't mess around. So the main skills that Mark uses in the book are botany and mechanical engineering, and those are his two specialties. I specifically say he has degrees in both of those. In the book, he has master's degrees in both of those.
Oh, I see. And
the other things are things that are like, well, of course, your astronaut is going to know how to use an EVA suit. He's going to understand how like spacecraft work and et cetera.
All right. Well, Keith asked, in The Martian, it looks like there was a real warehouse at JPL with Pathfinder parts. Was that real or just a Hollywood set?
JPL is certainly large. That was not filmed at JPL. So JPL doesn't really look like the way they depicted it in the movie. But there is a duplicate Pathfinder, for sure. That's real. They make duplicates of every probe that they send to Mars so that they can have one on Earth to experiment with. So, for instance, they have another, right now the Curiosity probe is on Mars, wandering around Gale Crater, doing its thing. It's the one that landed a few years ago. and they have an exact duplicate of it here on Earth, and they can say they can put it in controlled conditions and say, like, okay, here's what we want to do. We want to do something that's maybe a little risky or something with the rover on Mars, and we want to see if it can go up this incline and do that thing. Then they set that up on Earth and see if it can, you know. So yes, absolutely, they had a duplicate Pathfinder. They still have it somewhere.
So Zach asks, hi from Davis, obviously. Hey,
hi Zach.
What was your inspiration for the plant biology portions of the book?
Well, it was a pure necessity. I wanted him to be able to survive on Mars, and there's obviously no food there, so I knew he would have to grow it. And so that's why I made him a botanist, right? So that I could explain why he's so skilled at it. The plant stuff, you have to grow food. If there's no food to be had, you're going to have to grow it or starve to death, right? And so that's why there were the plant portions. Often people ask me why potatoes as opposed to some other crop. Potatoes have by far the best calorie yield per unit area of any crop. So you could actually, if you have a few hundred square meters of land, or just, he had like 126 square meters to work with or something, you can grow enough potatoes to survive for quite a while. But if you try to do that with other crops like wheat or corn or a bunch of other crops, it just won't work, because while they'll grow fine, you'd need so much more land to generate the calories that you're going to need to consume. And so potatoes are the best. What I originally wanted him to do was grow peas, just peas, you know, because it would make perfect sense for him to have access to peas. They'd be like in a meal pack or something. And peas, even when they're completely dehydrated, if they've been completely desiccated, like there's no water left in them at all, you can rehydrate them and plant them and they'll germinate. Because peas are, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, peas are the seeds for peas. Like, that's what you plant to grow pea pods.
Or hey, we learned something new tonight. That's great.
Give peas a chance.
That's right. Oh wow, good one.
I feel dirty. Anyway, so that's why plant stuff.
So Mendocino County Library asks, did you have a fully written backstory for Mark on Earth that helped shape his character on Mars?
No, actually, I didn't have any backstory at all, other than he's from Chicago.
And why did you pick the University of Chicago for Watney's alma mater?
I wanted Watney to have come from like an urban area. I don't know why. It's just kind of what I wanted. And I said, like, well, New York and LA are kind of always used, so let's go to the next biggest town. And I said, like, Chicago, America's third largest city.
Are you
simple as that? I actually know nothing about Chicago. I've only been to Chicago twice, and both only for short periods of time. Seems like a great town. It looks pretty cool. I did research on it to study for the Martian, but I don't have any personal connection to it. I don't have any family there or anything.
Sorry, Chicagoans. That's like,
yeah, I like Chicago.
No.
The 2 times I was there, I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks were expecting, oh, he's from there. There's some kind of secret connection, but
nope. I mean, yeah, no. Mark's from Chicago, I decided.
So where did you get the idea for Watney? I mean, where did his name come from? Was there some kind of backstory for that?
Yeah, well, his personality is based on my own. So you probably noticed I'm a bit of a smartass myself. And although he's an idealized version of me, he doesn't have my flaws, and he's better at all the things that I like about myself, and he doesn't have any of my downsides or flaws or neuroses or anything like that, right? So he's what I wish I were, kind of. And I think you'll find that's the case for every protagonist. He's somebody, every protagonist, here's my theory, my axiom, whatever, is every protagonist is someone the author wants to be or someone the author wants to screw. For the record, I want to be Watney.
Right.
But yeah, so as for his name, at the time I started the book, I was living in Boston, and I was a big Red Sox fan, Boston Red Sox fan. And I had the game on, a Red Sox game on in the background, and it was just on TV. And I'm like, I decided to name him Mark. I'm like, I'll give him a name, Mark, because Mark is based on the Latin Marcus, right? Which goes like Mark Antony, you know? It's based on Marcus, which means a disciple of Mars, right? The god Mars, right? So there you go. That's why he's Mark. A lot of people growing. There's a cat, by the way. That's Demi. She often makes appearances in my Skype or Google Hangouts calls because that's her favorite spot. So she'll be there.
That's great.
Anyway, yeah, one time, it's funny. One time I was like talking to a classroom of specifically girls in STEM. So it was all like teenage girls in a STEM education like class in high school, right? And so Demi jumped up into the background and it was just like, ah! It's like the sound of ovaries exploding, and it was just like adorable. Anyway,
Yeah.
so lost the thread.
Yeah, it's fine. So
cats
yeah,
do that.
yeah, cats do that. You know, to
What the hell was I
librarians
talking about?
especially too. Actually,
If I wasn't paying attention to me, why would I expect you to?
That's
What was I talking about? I lost it.
That's all good. Don't worry about it. So
Oh,
yeah,
no,
you're talking about Mark Watney. That's right.
Watney. So anyway, I was watching a Red Sox game, and the sideline reporter was named Heidi Watney, and I thought, oh, that's a cool last name. I'll take it.
Easy. Great.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part or favorite scene from the book? That's from Isabella.
Okay, from the book, my favorite was the run up to the launch of the Iris probe. So there's a probe, Iris, that they launch, and spoiler for anybody who hasn't read the book, we're going to be spoilerific, I assume.
Yeah, I think we can count on that.
Yeah, that probe fails, but it fails to launch. But the lead up to the launch, where they're going through the launch status check, where they're like, booster, go, guidance, go, Fido, go, ops, go. And it's just that launch status check, and then describing where everybody is and what they're doing. I thought that was some of the best writing I've ever done. It really ratcheted up the suspense, and it got the reader like on the edge of his seat or her seat. And then I got them all worked up and excited, and then I have the launch fail. And so I built up the suspense and then punched him in the teeth. It feels good.
Oh, that's funny. So let's see. Try to get some. I'm trying to mix up the questions here. We want to make sure we get to all the libraries that all the folks out there. So,
any questions from Livermore? I mean, come on.
Livermore. Hello from Livermore. That's about it. So, sorry, Livermore.
Yeah, that's my hometown.
That's right. So, yeah, I think we answered a few of those earlier. So,
okay, good.
Yeah. So, isn't the soil of Mars? This is from Bart. Isn't the soil of Mars full of perchlorate? Would potatoes grow on that? I bet you didn't have a botanist kind of fact check.
Well, okay, so what happened is freaking after the Martian came out, those bastards at JPL landed Curiosity on Mars, and it told us a bunch of stuff that invalidates aspects of my novels. Among other things, Curiosity discovered the high concentration of perchlorates in the soil. It also discovered that there's an enormous amount of water in the soil. That there's like for every cubic meter of Martian soil, there's about 35 liters of water. So Mark did all that work to like reduce hydrazine into hydrogen and then burn oxygen with it. And he blew himself up and he did all this dangerous crap when all he had to do was bring dirt in and heat it up. I can kind of get away with that one because I can say like, well, Curiosity's in Gale Crater. Mark Watney is in Acidalia Planitia, which is thousands of kilometers away. Mars does not have a single ecology, just like a single eco zone like Earth. Like Earth has the Sahara Desert and we have the Amazon Basin. So we have like vast differences in water distribution on Earth. So Mars could too. And so I can just say the Acidalia Planitia has very little water in the soil, and no one can prove me wrong until you send a probe. Now, as for actually answering his question, I have been getting conflicting reports on the effects of perchlorates on plant growth and on the amount of actual perchlorates in Martian soil. So I've been getting, some people tell me the perchlorates are too much and plants would not be able to grow. Other people tell me the plants would be able to grow, but they themselves would be toxic because of the perchlorates. And so you wouldn't want to eat them. And then other people still tell me perchlorates are bad for you, but bad for you in the same way that smoking is bad for you. So you could go ahead and eat those potatoes because eating perchlorates is better than starving to death. And so in the end, though, it turns out to be irrelevant. I wish I'd known this because this could have been an awesome subplot and I could have like worked all this out because it's actually not that hard to wash perchlorates out of the soil. You can literally do it with water. So he would use a whole bunch of soil to get a bunch of water. Then he'd use a little bit of soil, which he would wash with the water to wash the perchlorates out. Then he'd have to make new water to actually be the water that he uses for his crops. But it could have been cleaned out.
So that's going to be in the third edition of the
Martian errata edition. Yeah.
Right, the errata edition. That's right. So yeah, we actually had a question about that. Like, did you make changes between the Kindle version? It seems like they know this already. Did you make changes between the Kindle version and the official, the final
print version? Yeah. Print version. A few. Yeah, we went through an editing pass. Random House had me, change stuff. The editor, Julian. But it was minor. It was mostly just wordsmithing and just prose and like problems like with like, this paragraph is pretty clumsy. Rework that. I couldn't really understand the scientific concept you're talking about here. Or in this scene, you have a bunch of people talking, but you never tell me where they are. I don't know if they're in a meeting room or a restaurant or somebody's living room or what. And so that sort of stuff. And I also changed the final scene. In the Kindle version, originally the final scene was like back on Earth, and there's a kid that comes up and talks to him and stuff. And I changed that for the print edition because I just didn't like the way it felt. I didn't like the original final, so that was my decision.
And did your editor kind of counsel you on that, or was?
Oh yeah, no, he didn't like the original ending either. Okay. So we were of a single mind on that, and we had to go through a few kind of like revs of how do you end it, like how do you end this story. Some people think that the ending was kind of abrupt. It's just like, boom, story is over, leave. But I don't. I would rather leave the reader wanting more than leave the reader going like, oh God, the climax was like 40 pages ago. End already.
Well, that kind of sets up a question that we've got a lot: is when's the sequel coming out to the? People are saying, is there going to be a sequel? I mean,
no plans for a sequel because I have not come up with an idea that doesn't suck.
Okay.
Basically, like the primary idea, and let me go ahead and all you people who are whipping out your laptops to send me emails. The first idea that everyone comes up with is, well, the book leaves them immediately after they've been rescued. They're still near Mars. They haven't even gotten back to Earth. So the sequel could cover their trip back to Earth, and they're kind of way past maintenance ship, and things could break down and so on. And I'm like, yeah, but instead of a dude being alone on Mars, it's a highly trained, skilled, competent crew all working together on a spacecraft. And it's just less exciting. It's just less interesting, And so that one doesn't work. The next one is he gets in trouble again on some later mission. Can you believe that guy's luck? I mean, that strains credibility more than I can handle. And then the final idea is someone else gets in trouble and he's on the ground trying to help them. He's like, now he's in the NASA role. Well, that's less interesting because the main character, the one you really get attached to, is the person who's in trouble, not the guy on the ground helping. And so that would make him a secondary character in the sequel. And people like Mark. If there's a sequel, they want Mark doing stuff. So those ideas, in my opinion, all suck. Another option people often say to me is, hey, why not make a prequel? Show Mark going through his training and show da-da-da, And I'm like, can you name any prequel that doesn't suck? Anything. Any prequel that was even remotely as good as the source material. Prequels suffer because you know that like none of the characters you're familiar with can die, right? You're really, everybody knows how the end state has to be, and that's a really difficult way to tell a story.
It's true. That's funny. South San Francisco Library asks, how come Mark did not take his own entertainment to Mars?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and the real answer is I forgot. So basically, when people ask that question, I just say, look over there, and then I run. No, well, yeah, I also mentioned, like in the book, not all of them brought entertainment. They just brought like personal items. So the commander brought like an inexhaustible supply of 70s related stuff, right? Disco and TV shows and stuff, because that's her thing. Martinez brought a crucifix. Johansson brought Beatles albums and Agatha Christie books. And then I never mentioned what Vogel or Beck or Watney brought.
Right. So they probably did bring something, and just you didn't.
They might have brought something, or maybe they didn't bring something. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Do you like disco music? Are you a disco?
I do like it.
Okay.
My friends give me a lot of crap for that.
How about Three's Company?
You know, I watched it when I was a kid a lot. I don't think I'd enjoy watching it now.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is like one of the things I got so the guy who played Larry on Three's Company sent me like an autographed headshot.
Oh.
I was like, oh, awesome, yeah, thanks.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you don't have it framed above your TV or something. No.
I've got a lot of cool stuff framed actually around here. I could actually pick up the webcam and show you some stuff.
Oh.
So that's a cat. Over here, right here, we have a clapper that was used in the film, like the those. Here's a movie poster it's hard to see, but it's signed by like all the actors and performers that were in it. Stuff. What else have I got? I've got a bunch of stuff, but I'd have to walk around the room with it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's great. That's awesome.
I've got cool stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. When you were so you got to spend some time on the set, I'm assuming.
They invited me, but I'm not a comfortable flyer, and so I write about people going to space, and I don't even like to get on a plane. But I'm getting better at that. But I wasn't willing to fly to Budapest, which is where they did where they did the studio work.
Wow.
And they did the exteriors in Wadi Rum, Jordan, a Jordanian desert.
Wow.
So I could have gone to either of those. I didn't want to. Yeah.
Just took a pass on it. That's great.
Yeah, I got to meet I got to meet the cast and everything like that at the red carpet event. So that was cool.
That's good. So if this gets nominated for an Oscar, you think you'd fly down to do that, or?
Well, I would sure. If I got invited to attend the Oscars, I would absolutely go. I don't know if they invite the novelist, right? Because I didn't have any. I would end up being somebody's guest, right? I would end up. It's not like the Oscars would be, oh yeah, we got to get the novelist. Like Drew Goddard would belong there. I mean, he's the guy who wrote the screenplay, right? But anyway, yeah, if they invite me to the Oscars, I'll go. I'm flying down to LA tomorrow morning, so I'm getting better at flying. I'm just still not a very comfortable flyer. And Budapest, a 1 hour flight to LA is very different than a flight all the way to Europe.
So I think you kind of answered this with the part in the book about the Iris probe being your favorite part of the book. Was there a favorite part of the movie that actually you thought was the best adapted part? Yeah,
and this. Sometimes people consider this sort of a letdown of an answer, but my favorite thing in the movie was just the visuals of Mars, just the scenery and the landscape. Ridley Scott is a master of those big, wide, panoramic shots, and then him doing that with like Mars, and I was just like, oh hell yeah, because you can't describe scenery in a book. You really can't. You can talk about it for a couple of sentences and hope that the reader's mind fills in the rest. Or you can give extreme detail and the reader will throw your book away. Either way, you can't really convey like natural beauty in words. And so it was just awesome to see that on screen. I'm like, it was just Mars. I mean, it was just fantastic. The visuals are great.
That's great. That's cool.
And that's like Ridley's specialty. So yeah, it's even better than just any movie. I mean, he does that specifically very, very well.
Yeah. Oh, just for reference, that's a question from Livermore Public Library.
Excellent.
Just for reference. Right. So here's a real sciencey question. So this comes from Mountain View Public Library.
Wow, that's like a mile and a half from here.
That'll answer well.
That's right. So plutonium fast betas cause radiation damage. How does Watney avoid this fate given the long drive?
Because RTGs are heavily shielded, number one. Second off, the beta radiation that RTGs give off, even if they were unshielded, don't penetrate very deeply into the skin. So the worst thing you're likely to get from being exposed, even if you were exposed directly to the decaying plutonium, the biggest risk would be skin cancer, like melanomas, stuff like that. But even then, like RTGs are extremely well shielded, and inside they're actually covered with it's not like a big lump of plutonium and then some shielding. It's like pellets, little pellets of like lead. So even if you cracked open the case, you just get a bunch of lead pellets that are hot but otherwise safe. The biggest danger to an RTG is the heat, because it can get very, very hot. and it's hot. It's like having a burner.
I mean, have you seen one or physically?
Oh no, I mean I haven't seen one. They're very rare.
Okay.
But Curiosity is powered by one.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm looking for more science questions here, so here I'm gonna scroll up.
They had them as long ago in there were RTGs on some of the Apollo missions.
Oh, wow,
Yep.
that's for
In
a
fact,
long time.
Apollo 13, they had an experiment that was powered by an RTG, and so that experiment was in the lunar module, right? And then, well, they expected to leave it on the surface of the moon. They never went to the surface of the moon. They had to ride the lunar module all the way back to Earth, and they let the lunar module burn up, which means they let this RTG just, and but the RTG was well enough designed because they wanted to make sure they didn't spread radiation over a large area if there was a launch failure. So the RTG, they are almost certain, survived re-entry and plunked into the water, and it's in a very deep part of the ocean. And the bottom of the ocean is a great place for something radioactive because water absorbs radiation really well.
That's great. What would happen if an astronaut, so you're like a space expert now too, of course, you know, so what would happen if an astronaut slit their suit and tried to fly?
Yeah.
Would he be able to reach the ship?
Well, okay, so here's a spoiler for you, Paul. I mean, that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the movie, not in the book, but in the movie. So here's an interesting thing. I assumed when I first saw it that was completely unrealistic. I assumed that the air in the suit would run out almost immediately in real life, and the astronaut would just die. Like the air would just run out. But Commander Hadfield told me, actually, no, it actually is realistic because those suits have an emergency air supply. It's a tank at 6,000 psi, or maybe 6,000 atmospheres. I'm not sure, but it's this incredible, a huge amount of air on the EVA suits specifically for that scenario, specifically for if they spring a leak, they want to make sure that the astronaut can get back to the airlock, get in and get repressurized before they run out of air. So actually you could go as long as depicted in the movie with a leak that large, but that leak would not provide anywhere near the thrust as depicted. It would be like, you know, so.
That's a great answer. Okay, so let's see. One of our patrons would like to know, this is from Long Beach, California. Do you really see us getting to Mars? And if so, when?
Well, it's inevitable that we will eventually have humans on Mars. The only question is when. My estimate, whenever I'm asked, is about 2050. And NASA says they can do it by 2035. I'm sure they could if they got the funding they needed, but I don't have faith in them getting the funding they need. So I'm guessing more conservatively at 2050. However, even if there were no concerted effort at all to put people on Mars, eventually people would wander over there because over time technology gets invented, and even if no one was focusing on space travel, eventually people would accidentally invent the technology necessary for space travel. Here's the analogy I like to give for that. Modern day saddles for horses are technological marvels. They're made of composite materials, weatherproof straps. They're light, they're durable, they're virtually indestructible, they're comfortable for both the animal and the rider. They're perfectly shaped. Everything is great about them. They really, really could have used our modern saddle technology in the 1800s. I mean, they really, really would have been able to make use of it, but they didn't have it. Now, we didn't have like a multi-billion-dollar government research effort to develop a better saddle. So why are saddles so much better now in an era when we don't even need them and they're only used for hobbyists? Well, because all of the stuff that's in modern saddles was invented for something else. Nylon was invented for other purposes. Carbon fiber was invented for other purposes. The composites, the materials, everything was all invented for other purposes. And then people who made saddles are like, I could use that for saddles. So the same will happen eventually with space travel. It'll be something like, oh, okay, Boeing has invented this new material that helps direct like jet engine exhaust or something like that. And it turns out that material has a hella high melting point. It makes great rocket nozzles and so on. So one way or another, we will inexorably and absolutely go to Mars. The only question's when.
That's good. You know, an interesting side note on that is I recently heard that Playtex, the ladies' undergarment maker, was the first maker of spacesuits in the
They were.
That's pretty funny, I thought. So that's a great, great way to,
Well, it was because in the Apollo program they said like, all right, we're taking bids on making EVA suits for the astronauts, spacesuits, and a bunch of companies did bids, and Playtex was one of them. And NASA was like, are you kidding? You make bras, and they're like, we know how to make things that like can flex and stretch with the human body. Do any of these other companies? They got the contract.
They got the contract. It was great. So there were many attempts to raise the interest in sciences for the mainstream audience. Did you write The Martian at least partially to try to do this, or did you just want to write a really cool story?
I just wanted to write a cool story. I never have any objective in my stories other than to entertain the reader. There's no moral, there's no point, there's no purpose. I just want you to read it and go like, cool, and that's it. But the fact that it's had this positive effect, well, I'm really glad about that. I'm really happy.
Yeah, well, it's been incredible. I think I've seen a lot more interest in, and I think the timing of the discoveries of water on Mars couldn't have been more.
Yeah, that was great. Well, the thing is, actually, we're always discovering stuff about Mars. It's amazing how people don't realize how fast we're learning new things about Mars. Like I said, all these things that have invalidated parts of The Martian have all happened since I released The Martian. Like, we now know there's a huge amount of water in the soil. We now know a lot more about Martian weather patterns and systems, and how much radiation you get, and that there are perchlorates in the soil, and, and so on.
So, question from Sunnyvale Public Library: how did you calculate the Rich-Purnell maneuver?
Okay, that was very complicated. I had to so the complexity comes from Hermes, the ship that they used to get back and forth between Mars and Earth, is a constantly accelerating ion engine craft, which means it doesn't do point thrust accelerations. It's not traditional orbital mechanics. It's constantly accelerating. And when I was trying to work that out just purely mathematically, I was about 10 integrals deep before I, just started making a noose and looking for a rafter, right? And so I decided, all right, how does NASA deal with this? And it turns out, they cheating bastards, they do it with simulation. And so I'm like, well, I'm a computer programmer. I can write a simulator. And so, when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. So I wrote software. And so I made software to help me. It was basically a UI where I could where it would show the constantly accelerating ship, and I could change its angle at different points, and it would show the path that it ends up taking. And I just kind of dicked with it until I found the maneuvers I needed. And it worked. Oh, and people have since validated it. I mean, there's a few errors here and there because I didn't account for like the orbital inclination difference between Earth and Mars and stuff like that. But like within all of the stuff in the book, all the orbital trajectory maneuvers are accurate-ish.
Accurate-ish. This is close enough, right? For
yeah, like you could really launch at that window. You would really get there at that time. You could really do the Rich-Purnell maneuver, and so on.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So what do you have? So Emily from Twitter asks, what advice do you have for someone trying to write their first novel?
Write it. Basically, so I got 3 bits of advice for people. I get asked this a lot, so I've got 3 pieces of advice. Number 1, in order to write, you have to actually write. It's one thing to sit around thinking about your story and, oh, this will be awesome, and oh, I'll have this character, and here's this plot point, and thinking it out. But it's not a story until you write it. Until you actually write it, it's a daydream. And when you actually write it, it's not going to be as cool as you imagined it. It's perfect in your mind until you start writing it. And that's when you realize all the little flaws. You realize, oh my God, I have to describe 7 centuries of history so that the reader will have context on what's going on. And then you start to run into the challenges. But you have to actually write it. That's number 1. Number 2 is, and this one's very difficult, you should resist the urge to tell your story verbally to your friends and family. If you've got a story idea, you want to tell it. And if it's a good story idea, your friends, when they hear it, will be like, oh, hey, that's a cool idea. Tell me more. And they will actually be interested. They're not just placating you. They're interested. And you have to resist the urge to tell them about it. Because by telling them the story verbally, it satisfies your need for an audience. And it saps your will to actually write it. So you should make yourself a rule that says, like, no one gets to find out anything about this story other than reading it. And so that'll help motivate you to write it. And then the third thing is, there has never been a better time in history to self-publish. Right now is the best time in all of human history. And since the Gutenberg Bible till now, till today, there's never been a better time than right now to publish by yourself. There's no longer an old boy network between you and the readers. You can write your story, you can post it for sale with no middleman, and it takes no monetary outlay on your part. It costs you literally nothing. The only thing you risk is the time you spent writing the novel, which you wanted to do, right? So that's my advice to writers.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Can you describe your research process? Did
Google.
You Google. That's right. You mentioned that.
www.google.com, and then I type in the thing I want to know. Lots of research, lots of math. I don't know. It's like each problem. I didn't just sit there and say, like, I must now learn everything about spacecraft. I was like, all right, what's the thing that's broken now? And I'm like, okay, so that's the thing that's broken. All right, now let's go find out all about that.
And a side note from Viva that she asked, or he asked the previous question. The Aquaman quote wasn't in the movie.
I know.
What the heck?
I know. I'm so sad. I'm so sad. That is that's the one change that I'm really enraged at. They did put it in the promotional material. But,
you know, that's funny. So with a lot of movies about Mars just kind of suck. You know, just to be honest, John Carr from Mars.
There was the Mars Curse.
Mars Curse, right?
Right? The Mars Curse was if you made a movie that takes place on Mars, it's going to flop.
Right. And were you nervous about that when your book got auctioned or anything like that? Or?
See, I think the Mars Curse is sort of a what do you call it? Like almost false equivalency. It's just because two things take place on Mars doesn't mean they're even remotely similar stories, right? So, for instance, High School Musical and Breaking Bad both take place in Albuquerque. Do you compare them to each other?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, just
okay.
Those.
Yeah. So just because two stories both take place on Mars doesn't mean that they should be lumped together or compared together. Escape from New York and Friends take place in the same location.
It's true.
So
those would be matched up, actually.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. But anyway, so point is, I wasn't particularly worried about the so-called Mars Curse. Okay. I was mainly worried about the Mars Curse because I was worried that the studios would be like, no, we're not going to make a movie on Mars. Screw that. It's a graveyard for movies. Well, not anymore.
Next James Bond.
Yeah, the next James Bond movie is going to be take place on Mars.
Moonraker. Oh, there's Moonraker. Oh,
right. That was great. Oh man. So, did you read like a lot of Mars fiction? I think someone from Castro Valley asked, did you read Packing for Mars?
Yes, Packing for Mars by Mary Roach. I actually didn't read it until after I'd written The Martian. Would have probably been handy if I'd read it before. It's a great book. I recommend it to everyone. It's nonfiction, so it's about the realities of going to Mars and what you would need to do, and a bunch of stuff about the astronaut programs around the world. It's very well written. I also have read. I love Mars as a topic, so I've read a lot of science fiction that takes place there, of course.
Let's see. Somebody asked, what's on your T-shirt? What's written on your T-shirt?
It says, so an Irishman walks out of a bar. Yes, really, it can happen.
All right. Oh, yeah. What's your favorite Mars book? What's your...
The Martian by Andy Weir.
By Andy Weir.
I would say Ben Bova's Mars. So it's just, the title is just Mars. It's by Ben Bova. I liked it a lot. It was a pretty decently hard sci-fi book, like accurate science for the most part. There's some silly stuff, but really accurate. There was a great subplot that all the astronauts just start getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and they can't figure out why, and they're worried, did we pick up a Mars pathogen? Because there are people back in the ship still in orbit, and they're all fine. Only the people who are down on the surface are getting sick, and they're like, You know, we're eating the same ration packs, where everything is the same. So why are only the people on Mars getting sick? And the resolution of that was awesome. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who reads the book, but I would say that's my favorite book that takes place on Mars.
That's great. Let's see. So, sorry. Oh, here's a comment from a reader, probably from Chicago. You don't use the word freeway in Chicago.
I know, I've heard that. I've had other Chicagoans tell me that. Like, we don't say freeway. I'm like, oh my God. I made like 2 Chicago references the whole book, and I screwed one up.
All right. Let's see here. I'm just scrolling through the questions. There's quite a few still, so. About what? Oh yeah, Matt Damon. That's have you met Matt Damon yet, or Matt?
Oh, sure.
Damon?
Lots of times.
Have you?
No, because there's just lots of media events, like the red carpet event I got to go to, the opening, and then there was an event at JPL that we both attended, and then there were a bunch of parties right around the release. There was like the gala before, and then another party afterward. And where did I see him? Not too long ago. I don't remember.
Well, did you have him kind of like, when you're thinking about it, like, oh, if they option this book, who would play me, or who would play the Mark Watney
who
character?
would play me? Yeah. I never even thought about Matt Damon because he's such a superstar. It didn't occur to me that I had no idea that they would make this like huge budget movie out of it, right? I always imagined that. Well, I didn't imagine they'd make a movie at all. And then when they started taking it seriously, I thought they'd make like, they'd get some good but largely unknown actor. They'd film mostly on a couple of sets. There wouldn't be too much CGI. I had no idea they'd be like, we're going to throw $110 million at this project. And, it's like, oh, okay. And but when they asked me if you could have anyone play Mark Watney, who would it be? My first answer was Bradley Cooper, because he does smartass really well. So like Silver Linings Playbook, personality there. Also, Chris Pratt, I think, would have made a pretty good Mark Watney.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think people really do like them.
Damon absolutely nailed the character. I mean, he just completely nailed the character. So I'm really, really happy.
That's great. So someone asked, was it difficult to make the book into a well-made movie?
Well, you'd have to ask Drew Goddard and Ridley Scott about that, but I get the impression that, well, it was really Drew who decided what did and did not go into the screenplay, right? And I think he did a really good job. And he said that it wasn't that hard. It was mostly just pretty much a direct adaptation. I mean, like most of the scenes in the film are like line for line identical to the book. So
you made it easy for them, really.
I made it easy for him. Well, his one thing I was just like, well, a couple of things that Drew added are, first off, that line, I'm going to science the shit out of this, is not in the book. That's just Drew. So a lot of people are like, oh, I love that line, I'm going to science the shit out of this. I'm like, tell Drew. Sometimes when I'm in autograph lines, when I'm autographing books, people are like, ooh, right, science the shit out of it. I'm like, okay. Not my line.
That's right.
It's not in the book, but well, now it is that I'm writing it on this. But so yeah. Also, the whole scene where they explain the Rich Purnell maneuver visually in the meeting room, with like when Rich Purnell and Teddy Sanders and all the NASA bigwigs are there, that whole exposition scene where they explain how the whole thing works, I thought was just very beautifully done, because it makes it simple and understandable, and it was also funny. And I thought it was just just a very, very well written scene, and that was all Drew, and so.
That's great. Cool. So is there anything you're reading right now? Are there any authors you're really
I'm reading well, right this moment, I'm reading a pre-release. I'm reading a manuscript for a book called Dark Matter that my publisher is going to, they want to pull quote from me. So I like to put on the back of the book, right? And so I don't do that unless I've read the book, and so I'm reading that book right now. I don't read as much as I'd like. I ended up with a pretty busy life lately, So I've been working on the bone clocks, but I haven't been making much progress through it because just life keeps interrupting. It's very good. I just not making a lot of progress though.
Yeah. So we know that everyone's really excited to, obviously you don't envision a sequel, but they're really excited to find out what's next from you. Do you have any projects that you're working on that you'd like to share with us? Or
yeah, I'm working on my next novel now. Probably come out in late 2016. It's tentatively titled Zhek, Z-H-E-K, and it's a more traditional sci-fi movie. It's got aliens and faster than light travel and stuff, but done my own way. I've got this tiny little kernel of bullshit physics that enables faster than light travel, and it's not in conflict with any real physics, and so I kind of said, like, that's how you do fast. It took me weeks to come up with something that would work, that would enable faster than light travel, but not violate conservation of mass, conservation of momentum, conservation of energy, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, or causality. But I found something that wouldn't break any of that.
Are you self-publishing that one as you go too?
No, I've already got a contract for it.
Oh, good for you. Awesome. Yeah.
It's going straight to
exclusive contract. That's great. So,
yeah.
Cool. Well, we appreciate you spending your time with us. We know you're busy. Really want to thank you. I can't think of many more authors that I would love to talk to.
Well, thank you.
For an hour. I mean, I think we've had a great conversation. I just want to thank you. I can't imagine. Hold on, I got something here. Sorry, I'm like notes here. Sorry. So just to let everyone know, our next guest is going to be the Hugo and Nebula winning author Anne Leckie, and she's going to be with us on December 8th. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to thank you, Andy, for your time. And we look forward to Zhek. I think Zhek. All right. Well, thank you much, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.